Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the places at Hawk Blogger. And today you'll find me back home after a whirlwind trip to Chicago. Flew out early this morning with Bob Condata, and we both kind of bleary-eyed pulled ourselves through. He's a vet. He knows everything he's doing. I'm just like, oh man, why did I do this to myself? But appreciate Mike Sando's flexibility to keep our show on this Blue Friday. How are you doing today, Mike?
Good. Wouldn't miss it. Glad to be here. And I know those road trip feelings when you come back. It's great to get to go to the game, but you pay a little bit sometimes on the back end, especially those night games. You know, you end up sometimes not really going to sleep the night of, and you come home and, you're back at it.
You know, people use the term built different for these athletes a lot of times. I think sports reporters are built a little bit different. Some of them I see all those guys slaving away at their game stories till 2 a.m, and then some of them turning around and taking a 6 a.m. flight out and then planning to go their families on trips this weekend. It's like, I certainly am not built for that.
No, but it is still candy store type job. So, you do put in some long hours, but you're covering football and you enjoy doing it. And it's not physically challenging to your hands and your back, right? That much. There's just a lot of time. And, it's totally worth it. I've always enjoyed it, even with the travel. Although I can say it now, I don't travel as much as I used to. So I have it a little easier now. Waking up at home on Mondays is a big advantage for my productivity during the week.
Yeah, well, I can appreciate that. And certainly no complaints intended from me. All I've seen this year, Mike, is 7 Seahawks road games. They are 6-1 in those. I missed the Atlanta game. I guess maybe that's 5-1 that I've seen. Six of the 7. And the one game that they lost was the Detroit game, which was a pretty entertaining game nonetheless.
Yeah, they were pretty good in that game.
So
on offense.
I don't know if you think, I want to get your input on this. I made a suggestion to someone with the Seahawks yesterday that if they manage to win this division, they should petition the NFL to get their first game in the playoffs on the road, away from Lumen Field. That feels like home field advantage does not feel like an advantage for the Seahawks so far this year.
It doesn't, and normally you would just point to some weird thing about, hey, they only played tough teams at home, but they lost at home to the Giants. So, that kind of blows that up. I don't know what it is. I don't. You've done the research on home field and road and all of that, and we found that the differences, the advantages aren't, what they once were. So, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I do think that, though, I think they could have more of a home field advantage if they can solve the opposing teams in the big games having a lot of tickets to the game. I do think that that can help you in a close game. I do think it could make a difference.
And the reality is that will likely be a much lesser of an issue in a playoff situation, because tickets don't get sold until the end of the season or the week before, and a lot of traveling fans are making their plans during the summer before the season even happens. I certainly think there'll be less of that kind of issue.
And most people who hold a ticket would probably want to go to the playoff game themselves, right?
You'd hope so. You would hope so.
Yeah.
And I think the Seahawks are on a mission to prove that home field advantage is gone in the NFL, because they're winning when they go away from home and they're losing at home. This game, Mike, talk to me about what did you manage to watch the whole game? That's the first question.
I did, but I watched, I was watching the whole Raven Houston game. It's like 31-2 with 5 minutes. I was thinking in the last 5 minutes, how many people are actually watching right now? I'd love to know what the real ratings were then, but I do. I watched the whole thing through. The way they came out and ran the ball and almost ran it too much, I was fine with that, and it seemed to be working. They just couldn't. It's like they run it all the way down the field, and then Gino throws a pinball in the red zone that easily could have been picked. And I'm like, is that him? Is that the scheme? Why does that keep happening? This is a game they should have won going away, my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
They should have had the 14-0 lead, the 10-0 lead, and it should have gotten worse. But it's crazy offensively to me, how hard it looks. And, it was bad weather. So part of me in my mind was like, remember that Ram 49er game in bad weather, 12 to
Yes.
6?
Thursday
And
night
those
game.
quarterbacks looked like crap. Those guys looked terrible. And I thought Geno didn't look good. And he couldn't, no throws down the field. He finally gets 10 yards downfield or so. And it's all DK Metcalf can do to gather this thing it was a great catch. Like, he couldn't even get it to him. I was like, is Geno Smith hurt? Is the weather that bad? This passing game was, way more inept than it should have been to me.
Well,
I don't know why.
That is 2 out of the last 3 Thursday night games late in the season that go without a touchdown, Mike. And, how much of that is a factor, these later in the season Thursday night games? And in this case, I can't remember. I think maybe Gino was the one who mentioned it afterwards. This wasn't even a divisional opponent where they already kind of know who they're playing and can kind of game plan without having to game plan. It's the first time they face them. And how much do you think that plays a role in these kind of ugly games?
I think it plays a role. I don't think it carries over every time. I think we've seen some. Maybe it was really good teams. Didn't we have a really great high scoring?
We just had the Chargers against the Broncos. I think
Broncos
was a high scoring one last week.
Not, but wasn't Baltimore in another one maybe or something? Where
they definitely it's not all Thursday night games. I just wonder about these late season ones to some extent.
Yeah, and I would think too I think the holiday thing is a these guys all have families around. They're you're probably the team and the coach is giving you more time away. It's probably more of a seat of the pants type game, right, for everybody. You could imagine the Bears players know they're not in the playoffs. Are they all coming in for extra film study, or are they right? And then Seattle has to have the travel on top of it. They probably get some time with their families, holiday wise, and you're just holding on. So I can buy some of that. I think I can buy that, but still, it looked worse.
It did.
Like, shouldn't there be a few more signs?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just whatever they got the win. It would have been a terrible loss. So now they can get some rest and not have any of those excuses or reasons.
Exactly. That will not be the reason.
If they play their best game, if in the last game they play their best game, and the offense looks pretty good, you can feel a lot better about it going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We're talking to Mike Sando of The Athletic. And, Mike, for as ugly as that game was, I thought there were some interesting aspects of it. Start with the Seahawks on defense, and then I want to move to the Bears offense. Yeah. But Mike McDonald this morning in his press conference said that, well, actually, I think it was in his Brock and Salk interview, one of the two, that pound for pound, he thinks Devin Witherspoon is the best defensive player in the NFL. And, of course, he's gonna pump up his own guys. Part of the reason I found that interesting was Leonard Williams is having quite a year. And obviously he's a bigger dude, so many more pounds. But I'm curious how you think about those two players relative to other defensive players in the NFL.
That's a great question. I said during the game that I think is there anyone better than Witherspoon pound for pound near the line of scrimmage? And so I think Mike McDonald's onto something there. The poundage part of it is a key consideration because what he probably means is under a certain amount of pounds, who affects the game as violently as Devin Witherspoon, right? I think it's different when you're a 300-pounder. I mean, you are violent. You're big. You pack a lot of punch, and it's kind of like, a heavyweight boxer. We're a little bit more impressed. Think of if boxing history, like Tommy Hearns is 6'1", 145 pounds in his prime, but could punch almost like a heavyweight. Like he could knock you out. Pound for pound, right hands in the history of boxing, it's him. But like Mike Tyson or George Foreman could hit harder, right? They're just bigger guys. So I think that's what he's talking about is under a certain weight, and I would agree. Can you find anybody who's kind of that rangy or skinny or that really not just can do it, but relishes it? I mean, he beats these blocks near the line of scrimmage, and he blows people up, and he stands over them, and he loves it. I think we saw that more when he was a rookie, I felt like, than we did last year for whatever reason. And now we're seeing it again. So I think it's a great point. And I think Leonard Williams probably goes into a bucket with a larger number of people his size who can impact a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could probably come up with 15 people in the league who can affect the game similarly to Leonard Williams who are 300 pounds, right? Probably 10 or
Mm-hmm.
there'd be a number of them who could. But can you find an equivalent of Witherspoon? Even one who does the types of things he does, plays the game the way he does in that size range. And we'd probably have to really look and think. And I can't, off the top of my head, maybe there is one. I can't think of them.
Well, it's interesting. The player that Pete Carroll compared Devin Witherspoon to before he had even played a snap in the NFL was Troy Polamalu. That was the guy that when he compared his instincts and how he watched him play and the decision making, that he reminded him of Troy Polamalu, obviously another USC guy. And that was obviously very high praise. And I don't think Devin Witherspoon is a carbon copy of Troy Polamalu, very different playing styles. But another
There's
pound
also
for pound
25 pound difference in how
Yes.
much they weighed.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're special people. I just think Devin Witherspoon you can see is different in how quick he is and then how violent he is. He's a little bit of a throwback to in terms of really being a striker kind of when he hits. He's not just wrestling you down and hoping other guys arrive. He's like bringing you down, you know, and that's a rare thing. He's at 185 pounds or something like that. That's
He's a small guy.
very rare. 6 foot 185. I mean, he's not gonna shouldn't be pushing around anybody, but he's so elusive. And so many of these receivers that are trying to block him, they're not even close to the same mentality as him, right? Those guys want to run routes and catch the ball, and they have a job to do. This guy, this is who he is. This is how he plays. And so he overmatches those types of players. Whereas I think in a Leonard Williams, like there's a lot of good big guards who can trade punches with you too, right? It's just harder to me, it's harder to have the same type of impact sometimes as a Witherspoon can when they can double team easier, or you've got a 320-pound guy on you, or they run away. This Witherspoon, he shows up places.
He certainly stands out. I mean, making plays on the edge, he's making plays all over the field, and that certainly stands out. And he's also an interesting character, Mike. I don't know how much you've got a chance to interact with him, but his persona on the field, to be as chirpy and energetic and just like a ball of fire out there, to then when he is in front of, you know, the press or media or off the field talking, he is withholding. He is very like quiet, terse, wants to kind of get on with it. It's almost never that I see those two types of disparate personalities. I mean, Richard Sherman, chirpy on the field, chirpy off the field, right? Like that's usually how I see it. So it's been interesting kind of seeing that he really is all about the ball. He's all about football. He's really not that interested in building this off-field reputation and persona, or really just talking about himself in general.
I love it. I think you need more guys like that. You know, whenever we talk about the standard that gets set in a league, like, you know, there's been a lot of talk about, hey, what's wrong with the NBA? What's different? And I think on any team, it's who are your best players having a Witherspoon type mindset. Now, I don't know what he's doing behind the scenes with his preparation or any of that, but I would assume it's really good. And when your best players are like that, I think you have a chance to recruit others and get them in that mold. I think when the Seahawks had their great defense, they had guys like that. You know, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Bobby Wagner. These guys were really pros, and they loved to play, and they brought a certain temperament to the field, whether or not they were super outgoing off the field. You said Sherman was, but Cam was different. Bobby Wagner had his personality, but they all brought it in how they played. And I think the more guys you can get like that, like I want one at every level of the defense, right? You'd love to have one in every meeting room, right, at each position. Somebody who really sets your tone. I think it can be underrated how much of a difference that can make on your team.
Well, one of the things that kind of piqued my curiosity, Mike, and I apologize, I didn't give you any heads up beforehand. I did a little research just before we got on together, was thinking about the Leonard Williams piece and thinking about he's played like he has 9 sacks now as a defensive tackle. He's going to be close no matter what to his career high, which was 11.5 sacks. It's a pretty big total for an interior lineman. I think he's going to get some votes for defensive player of the year. I think it's possible he will. And I went back, Mike, to see what was the last time a Seahawk defender got even a single vote for defensive player of the year.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a guess, or do you want me just to tell you?
Yeah, let me think about this. I would say it could have been Earl Thomas.
That is a good guess. You almost are exactly right. Bobby Wagner in 2017 got a single vote. So very little. But before then, Earl Thomas was the one that got 7.5 votes in 2013. Richard Sherman got 4 votes. They kind of split some of their votes up that year. But it's been a minute since there's been a Seahawks player that was even in the conversation for even getting a vote. Not winning, but just getting a vote. And it feels like the Seahawks have someone in Leonard Williams that should at least be in the conversation for that. And it's a little bit interesting that it's happening in later in his career. That's not a little bit maybe like a Patrick Kearney when he came to Seattle and had that one big year. But doesn't usually happen later in careers.
And also, like, you're on your third team, right?
Right.
I think he's an interesting player who's been a really quality. How many really quality players change that much?
Him and Ernest Jones, apparently.
Yeah. I don't think it says anything bad about him. He was with the Jets, and they made their decision. The Giants made a decision. I don't know if those teams have made good decisions over the years. It doesn't seem like they make a lot of good decisions. So, I remember when the Seahawks were criticized for making that trade, that they gave up too much. Remember that? That
was like even happening season. Early in this year.
Yeah, so good for him, good for them. I think it does show too that the Mike McDonald addition is helping them get the most out of their personnel on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a number one thing they were hoping to get out of him was, hey, we have some good players. Now, they thought they had good players on offense too, and that's not working the same way, but they made that bet that as great as Pete was as a coach, even as great as he was as a defensive coach for a long time, it had been eroding, and through whatever reason, either the vision of the head coach or the defensive coordinator, the coaching staff, whatever, some of these guys like Leonard Williams or even Devin Witherspoon last year weren't having the impact they should have. That this defense could be a lot better without having to have 3 years of drafting, right? Or without having to be the number one spending team in free agency, that they were close. And I think they've proven to be right in that. And
I saw in your roundtable article on The Athletic with, Jeff Howe and Zach Kiefer, right?
Yeah, I think we were doing it, yeah.
Yeah, you guys were talking about this topic and about this decision to move on from Pete Carroll, and do they have to make the postseason for this to be a success for making this move? And all of you were of no. And I think I'll read a little bit here from Jeff Howe. He says, there's enough evidence to believe McDonald is the right coach for the job, so that's a major win right there. Be a disappointment to miss the playoffs, especially as they wonder what might have been with some of their injuries. They should finish with a winning record for the third consecutive season, so that's a plus. And you've talked about last time we had you on the show about the fact that the Seahawks have improved from 27th to 9th. That was before last night's game in EPA per play.
I think they're 8th now, yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting because now he's pulled even the same win total as Pete Carroll. And there's some people that look at that and say, well, hey, John Schneider said that they were a disappointment, that they underachieved last year. And how can you say that this year is successful when they have the same amount of wins? Like, I thought if they underachieved that this should be more. I happen to feel much more like you, where the formula that Pete Carroll was winning with did not feel sustainable or have much of a ceiling, whereas Mike Macdonald's come in and actually created one side of the ball that's a clear strength that you can build on. There was no clear strength for the Seahawks under Pete Carroll over the last couple of years.
Right. I think the criticism that the first part, the record part of the criticism that is fair is the offensive side of the ball, because it was pretty good and not a lot changed. I understand there's injuries or this, whatever, but I don't feel like I feel like that they should have been better on offense this year, and that 100%. Can go on the GM and the head coach. Usually I'd more on the head coach, but I think the GM was involved in that too, in putting together who their coordinator was and all of that. So that's a fair criticism, but it's not an overriding one to me. I felt like they needed to not, it would, to call this, to feel good. Look, we knew the Pete Carroll era was nearing an end, right? That's a big part of the equation, is sort of when to move on. And so we knew it was getting close to be able to move on, but you have to be careful because you don't want to fall off a cliff when you move on and have the wrong guy. So you have to allow for the fact that a change was going to be made sometime in the next couple of years anyway. And they made it when they did. So now I want to see, we're not worse, have a winning record again. And this defense can't keep getting worse every year for the 10th year in a row, which is what was happening. So I think it's definitely not a failure. The change is not a failure for sure. I feel that. I feel like it's a qualified success, and it's not a resounding success.
Correct.
A resounding success should be your top half of the league on offense. You feel like you're going to even get better next year with the same staff on offense, and we might win a playoff game, right? Then you're thinking hey, why not us? People should be talking about Seattle like, hey, they're that team you don't want to play. No one's saying that. Everyone's watching the game last night saying they're the team you don't want to watch. Okay, so that's a distinction, and we need to acknowledge that. We can't just sugarcoat this whole thing as a resounding success. It's a qualified success to me. And if before the year, someone had said that this should be how it go, I think a lot of people would have probably said okay, because they felt like it was getting to be time for a change.
Well, it's an appropriate time to have this conversation, not just because of the record that the Seahawks now have equaled as of last night, but because the story came out that Pete Carroll has expressed interest in this Chicago Bears job. And I sat there, Mike, in every post-game press conference for Seahawks players, and a Chicago media member asked every player about Pete Carroll and what do you think about Pete Carroll? And these guys were one after the next, could not be more complimentary and effusive in their praise of how much they love that guy and how much they'd want to play for him and how much everybody would want to play for him. Got a little uncomfortable from my perspective. Felt a little bit like there was a missing commentary on their existing coach that was missing to some extent. But I don't think that was intentional. But I'm curious. I mean, I was surprised when I talked to people in and around the Bears, reporters primarily. Nobody was dismissing this out of hand. Nobody was dismissing the idea of the oldest coach in the NFL coming in and taking over for what would be the number one overall pick in his second season, one of the youngest quarterbacks in the NFL. Seems like a bit of an odd marriage in that regard, but I'm curious, do you think that there's any legs to it?
I don't know about the front office, Kevin Warren and the ownership, I don't know what they're leaning towards. So I can't say that there's any legs to it from that standpoint. They probably don't know. They would need to talk to him, right? Have a meeting, talk to other candidates. So that's total guesswork of whether they would want to hire him. No idea. Can't know it. But why wouldn't you want to talk to him? I think some of these, like who's running the Jets search, like Rick Spielman and
Isn't it Dimitrioff?
Mike Tannenbaum.
Tannenbaum.
Yeah. I think their strategy is just talk to a million people, right? And I like it. That's what I would do. I'd be trying to learn as much as I can and get some different perspectives. How could you not bring in Pete Carroll? Now, I'll say this. People focus too much on let's get the right sexy scheme for this quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what it's about. Of course you want to have a good scheme. But, every quarterback who's played for Pete Carroll's basically had their best year. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that
Even
true?
into college.
Even in college, you'd say they had their best year with him, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Drew Bledsoe with him in New England, top 10 in adjusted net yards per pass attempt or whatever, right? It's fine. Um, so the idea that everyone's longing to have this Ben Johnson or whatever, great, but he's got to be able to coach the whole operation. Look at is Bobby Slowick hot right now?
He is not.
A year ago, oh, we got to have Slowick, and I'm not criticizing Slowick. There's many factors that could go in, but the shiny object that you want isn't always what you're getting in a head coach of a team. So I would love to talk to Pete Carroll if I were them. I wouldn't just let him do whatever he wants. I would want some assurances or some influence on what he's going to do with his staff. I think that was a thing at the end in Seattle. And so he would have to present a plan that would be really appealing that way, and not feel like it's going to be stagnant. But
yeah,
if
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, if they just picked him, like, if they just hired Pete Carroll today versus letting whatever is going to happen, they'd probably come out ahead.
Say more. What do you mean by that?
Like, they're going to do this huge search and settle on somebody, right? They're going to get somebody. And it's going to be it could be the next Eberflus, or it could be the next Matt Nagy, or it could be even the next Lovie Smith, or it could be the next whoever. They think it's going to fit comfortably for them. Because remember, they want a comfortable fit, right? They don't want someone to come in and take the power away from Kevin Warren or be in charge of the whole operation, probably, in my opinion. So what I'm saying is, if they just hired Pete Carroll, would probably be a better coach hire than whoever they're going to hire, most likely. Would you agree with that?
I don't know enough about all the names you just mentioned would indicate that that's probably true given their track record. I don't know the individuals enough to know whether that's the case. But
we know he's a good coach.
He is a good coach. He will always be a good coach, and people will always want to play for him. That's for sure.
The Bears' chances for hiring a good coach are what, 50%?
At best, yeah, sure.
So what if they hire Pete Carroll? What are their chances of having a good coach?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a little bit.
It's sure, but like good in what? I mean, good enough is a different way to look at it. Is he going to be good enough? I don't know. And is his ceiling going to be high enough?
And he's 73, and
exactly for how long?
He's won the Super Bowl. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at the rest of their coaches. I don't think they were playing in those games. Right now, Pete Carroll would be at least the third best coach in the history of the Bears. Correct?
Yeah.
George House, Mike Ditka, it'd be Pete. So I'm just saying that as I think it's easy to write off, or it's easy, especially in this market, when you got sort of tired of some of the Pete things the last few years, and it has stagnated. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're getting. It's a fresh start for him too. But he is 73, so what's your plan? Do you think he's going to be coaching at 73, 4, 5, 6, 7? You do have to take that into account. And maybe you do want somebody younger, and that's just a better fit for your organization. You could totally decide that. And you may talk to Pete Carroll and go, I don't know. He wants to do it X, Y, Z ways. But they would be a much better organization if he'd been their coach the last 5 years than whoever they had. And
no
there's
doubt
a
about
good
that.
chance that they'll be a better organization the next 3 years with Pete. That's a higher percentage chance than whoever else they get. Okay? That's what I'm saying. It's a higher chance. Doesn't mean they can't find someone better. But he would raise their floor dramatically.
I think that is a great way to look at it. I think he is a program builder and a culture builder, and those are not easy to come by. And so everyone falls in love with the scheme of the weak coach that can do something on one side of the ball. Pete, to your point, I think is known as a defensive coach, but he has had pretty substantial impact on shaping a lot of good quarterback seasons pretty much everywhere he's gone.
Did every OC he have a top 10 offense? Any people? I know Shane Waldron did last year. He obviously forgot how to coach this year.
Well,
Shane
Waldron
was
and
number 10 last year,
Schottenheimer
right?
and
Schottenheimer and all those
Bevel.
guys probably all had top 10 offenses, I would think, with them. There's no magic schemes. I mean, I love what Mike McDonald's doing, and it's really helping them. But on offense, there's not. You don't just have the Shanahan system and it works, right? It doesn't. Mike McDaniel loses his quarterback. They're a bottom 3 offense in the league. This year, Kyle Shanahan has struggled to get it going. Bobby Sloak struggled to get it going. There's no magic thing that comes in and makes it look good all the time forever for offensive coordinator. So that's just all I'm saying is if you chase that, you got to be a little bit careful. And also, let's just say Ben Johnson, he may be great at that, but he may not be a great coach of the whole team.
Right. Right. Well, and part of the reason I was bringing this up was because Caleb Williams, seeing him up close and personal last night, seeing him barely throw the ball past the line of scrimmage, it was, I mean, they're in a bad place regardless. But someone's going to have to come in there and really change a lot because he does not look capable of playing the position right now. 67 sacks on the year to go along with, I think I was just reading this, that this is from the 33rd team. He has a completion percentage of 35.6% on throws of 10-plus air yards on the year. Out of 530 quarterbacks to have 100-plus such attempts since 2000, he ranks 520th out of 530.
That's not good. It's not
So
good.
you need to find somebody who's going to come in and, like, everybody else is fireable. GM, everybody else, other than the owner. Caleb Williams is their quarterback for the foreseeable future. They've got to find a way to make him a great player.
But then you get into this question of, do you want somebody to come in and coddle him, and it's Caleb's team and it's Caleb's way? Or do you want someone to come in and set up a program and tell him, tell him how it's going to be too, right? Someone with credibility and confidence. I think a lot of times these discussions are like, hey, what can they do for Caleb? Instead of, we take 67 sacks, we'll have someone else back there.
Pete wouldn't be that guy.
No, but they wouldn't, maybe they would coddle that. I mean, that was some of the criticism.
Coddle's not the word. I think you're right.
But enable? Are you enabling this? Like
that's
I would want
exactly the
someone to
right
come
way
there
to
strong
think
and
about
say, like, hey, this is how we're gonna. Everyone's accountable here. No one's on scholarship. We're gonna, the offense is gonna look a certain way, and on some of these, let's face it, some of these are on the quarterback. We got to get rid of the ball. Mm-hmm. Because right now and people are getting wise to this, but like. The offensive line is bad there, but is it that bad?
He was getting protection. A lot of it, like the Seahawks were not getting to him quickly. There weren't a lot of quick sacks in that game. There were a lot of him escaping out of the back end of the pocket and running into more problems.
Yeah. So just, the right leader comes in there and you don't have to be mean about it, but you set up an offense, how you're going to run it, and he's got to do his part too. And behind the scenes, if he's taking too many sacks, we're talking about it. Instead of just, hey, what do we have to do for Caleb?
A little side bit here. We're talking to Mike Sando of The Athletic. My first time going to Soldier Field. And I'm aware that there's work going on. They're trying to build a new stadium out in the suburbs. What a shame that will be. What a great setting for a football game. Like the whole walk up next to the museum on the water. It's a shame. It's a shame that a stadium like that is no longer. I mean, it's not like a Candlestick situation where Candlestick was such a sty. This is like a venerable stadium that is in a really great city and a great location. Personally as a fan, I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I've never been colder than standing outside that stadium, I think, in my entire life at various points over the years. Unbelievable. I have good memories there, too. I think Some of the sight lines for the film there is the worst film in the league from where the angle is. For
Yes.
the insiders, they hate that. And the view from the press box is fine. It's fine. But yeah, you wonder. It's kind of like, there's never been another Mile High Stadium, has there? If you think about it, like they had to
Yeah.
replace it at a certain point, but it's not quite the same.
Mike, so as we kind of wrap here, I want to turn our attention to this closing race between the Seahawks
Yeah.
and the Rams. You wrote about in your pick six column, one of the things you wrote about was about the Rams having recast themselves as a physical football team. And the headline, which I don't think you wrote, says the NFC West's most physical team. I don't know if you would agree with that statement or not. But they used the game against the 49ers. There was an exec that kind of used that game as evidence that the Rams have kind of become the more gritty, physical team between the two of them.
Yes. And some of that with the 49ers, I think, is missing Trent Williams and some of their players. But if you look at what they've done over the last couple of years, I think it is something that like the Seahawks might want to follow as well. Because what they've done is they've changed their run game on offense to be more of a physical style instead of the outside zone. They're more gap and, take you on type blocking scheme. Then they've gotten some offensive linemen that are good for that, right? A couple guys, in the draft and in free agency who bring that type of an attitude. Then they have a back in Williams who is physical, especially for his size, kind of a pound for pound tough guy runner. And then they have that all tied together with the play calling offensive head coach who has leaned more on the run. They've been the most run oriented team in the division. By most ways when you look at it. So that combination, all those things coming together, to me feels like what Seattle wants to try to accomplish, right? We've talked so much about how much shotgun they're in or what type of runs they're doing, or are they five-man protections, all of these sorts of things, where the Rams have made a shift, a coordinated shift to be a certain way after maybe getting a little soft. That's the observation that was being made, and I think Jordan Rodriguez, who I work with at The Athletic, wrote a big piece detailing the scheme stuff, and that's what kind of reminded me to do that item last week. And I do feel like there's a lot to that, and it's one of the reasons they're maybe have a little advantage in the division right now.
Yeah, I mean, I find the Rams to be one of the most curious cases in the NFL. And the reason I say that, Mike, is because they seem to be celebrated as this team that's like really risen, the Phoenix from the ashes for the second season in a row. They've won, what is it, 4 in a row? And yet when I look at them play, and I look at that team, the offense has been awful a lot of the year. Matt Stafford has taken a step back a lot of the year. He was atrocious against the 49ers. He threw what should have been 3 interceptions. They were losing to the Jets in the fourth quarter of that game. They were behind the Saints 14-0 in the first half. And so somehow... Yeah. When they go and they beat the 49ers without scoring a touchdown, it's, man, the Rams can win in any way. They can win in the physical way and they can win in the big ones.
Yeah.
But no one, like, Seahawks, like...
Yeah, or how good are they, Yeah.
That's kind of the question for me. Like, I think the whole NFC West, the Rams have a negative point differential. Like, there's not a good team in history.
They're averaging 20 points a game on offense. There's no doubt. So... I think all I was writing about was just the physical style. I'm not saying the crowning them or saying they're a great team. I think I
was not meaning to point out you.
Yeah, but I think you make a fair point. So they're 11th in offensive EPA per play, and they're bottom. Let me see how low they are in defense. They're 28th on defense. So I think they have a couple of nice pieces they've drafted on defense. But yeah, I agree. I don't think they're any sort of great shakes. I think they've probably fallen off less than people thought they would in some ways with that losing Aaron Donald and then just kind of they're another year removed from being a Super Bowl type team. So, and we'll see what happens to them if Stafford's not there. They could be right back down. But I think they have gotten a little bit of an edge in how they play, meaning like a physical edge that gives them maybe a little bit more of an identity. Even though, like I think you're right, they're still a 9-6 team.
Yeah, and I mean, when the Seahawks played them head to head many weeks ago, at this point, it took Geno Smith throwing 2 interceptions in the red zone, 1 return for a touchdown. It took JSN volleying another pass that hit him in the hands up in the air for an interception. It took Connor Williams snapping a ball over Geno Smith's head. It took the Seahawks missing an extra point. Just that alone was the difference. It took the Seahawks getting not from the 13-yard line in overtime, not being able to convert a third one or fourth one. There's a million things the Seahawks did to lose that game. The Rams had 7 3-and-outs. That was only the second time in Sean McVay's history as a head coach that he had that many 3-and-outs in a game. So I don't think the Seahawks are very good, but I find it very curious how many people do say the Rams are the team you don't want to face in the playoffs. That seems surprising to me.
Yeah. Well, they've beaten Minnesota and they've beaten Buffalo. So, I think those are a couple of wins. And I think Minnesota was week 8, probably on a short week for Vikings on the road. And then week 14 Buffalo, where they actually had to score in special teams to win the game. But still, I think a couple of those games stand out. And you throw ahead the Stafford McVay factor. I think that's in people's minds too. You're right though. Like I was asked, I think in one of those roundtables a couple weeks ago, of like, hey, who would be the team you wouldn't want to play between Tampa and the Rams? And I think I leaned a little towards Tampa just because they've scored more. Their offense has put up points more. And then I did allow kind of in the end, I kind of covered myself a little and just said, well, the idea of McVay and Stafford in the playoffs, there's something to that, but I wasn't really giving them full flowers. I hedged a little bit like you did. I think they are the type of team though, like who would be more likely to win a playoff game, the Rams or the Seahawks to you? I don't think either one of them's like winning the second playoff game.
Yeah.
But it might be the Rams, would you say, or no?
I think the Rams, just because they've been winning more consistently and they've been hurting themselves less. Like the Seahawks have hurt, like coming into this game last night, they were number 1 in the NFL the last 3 weeks in penalties. Mike, they've only had 3 games all year with a plus turnover differential, 3. And they're 8-1 this year when they're just neutral or positive in turnover differential. So all their losses have come from, this bevy of turnovers, this bevy of penalties. And so I don't think the Rams are more talented or better. I just think they are hurting themselves less often than the Seahawks.
I'd agree with that. I think the Rams have gotten some of their offensive line back, and I think now that their right tackle may be injured, but I think that's helped them. But you're right, Seattle's more of a mystery to me. I think the thing you like about the Rams is that they have a coherent offensive
philosophy
operation because of their coach and their quarterback, and especially the coach. And I think Seattle's just been, you just know that that's not exactly the way the head coach wants to play. And you're watching every drive to see through that lens, aren't you? Kind of like, oh, are they going to run here? And then they run on 3rd and 3 last night, and I'm like, okay, is that running too much? It's like, I just don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I guess we know what they are and we don't like it, kind of.
No, I think you're right. The first case, I think that they're still searching on offense. And I think they were searching on defense earlier this year and they found something. I don't think that part of that involved large scale personnel changes to match what Mike McDonald wanted and needed that have worked out. They've not had that opportunity to change over the offense in the way that they might want to. And maybe the coaching staff. the way that they want to get what I think they want. So I agree on that front. None of this is to say, hey man, the Seahawks should be getting flowers over the Rams.
Yeah.
I just find the Rams to be an odd recipient, given that they're a negative point differential team. And we'll see. We'll see how they do against the Cardinals. You know, the Cardinals are really banged up, missing both their starting tackles. James Conner is iffy for that game. They put one on the Rams the first time, but we'll see how this game goes tomorrow night.
The Rams have not run away from anybody. You know that the reason when I was asked about Tampa, I felt like Tampa has like blown out some bad teams, right? Or they've lost a couple too. But when they really get it going, it's like they're putting up a bunch of points. Here's the Rams wins: 19-9, 12-6, okay, 44-42, but 21-14 over the Saints, 28-22 over the Patriots, 26-20 Seahawks, 20-15 Raiders. Right? I mean, none of these are like, oh wow, the Rams really got it going. Whoa, look out! Whereas I feel like some of these other teams, like Tampa at least, they might put up 45 someday.
I'll tell you one game, Mike, and then I'll let you go. We always end up going so long. Appreciate your flexibility. I'm really curious to see this Atlanta team go and face Washington. I think the assumption should rightfully be that the Commanders win that game. Jaden Daniels just had an amazing performance against the Eagles.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to seeing what Michael Penix. Everyone's just assuming like, hey, that was against the Giants. I'm curious how that team will look against a still vulnerable Washington defense.
Agreed. I've been excited to watch Penix play, so I'm glad they put him in there. He had a good game, I thought, last week. It was just the Giants, but he was really good on third down, really good on third and medium to kind of third and long. Even his one interception was on a third down play down in the red zone where Kyle Pitts basically handed the ball to the defense. It was nothing wrong with the throw. So I liked what I saw and want to see more. And I do think that makes it way more interesting than if Kirk Cousins was going there, although that would be kind of fun, Kirk against his old team too. But really, we were sort of done. Whatever was happening with Kirk Cousins really wasn't.
It wasn't fun.
It was not.
It wasn't fun
good,
for anybody.
So, yeah, they're a curiosity. Atlanta's
Mike.
A little bit of a curiosity. Yeah.
It'll be interesting, Mike, and maybe this will be a topic for one of your columns. After Caleb Williams was considered a generational quarterback prospect, number one overall, unquestioned.
Yeah.
You could end up with every quarterback taken other than him in the first round having a better first year, depending on what happens with Michael Penix.
It's possible. Yeah.
At this point, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. I mean, J.J. McCarthy is hurt, so that's the one guy that would be on the sideline. But Drake May and now Michael Penix, we'll see. We'll see how this season ends out. But an interesting draft class, the QB position for sure.
I'm always interested too in when people are super invested in their draft analysis about Caleb Williams was all this and that. Then do they just always blame whatever's around them for like 5 years? You know,
Of course.
Yeah, that's always interesting to me because I do think he's really, really talented. And we saw some of those. You know, he made a couple, even the throw that was nullified by penalty. I think he does have real good talent, but it does take more than that. So we'll see.
It does. It does. Mike, what do you have coming up for us on The Athletic?
Yeah, pick six column be coming Monday, and I'm not 100% sure what direction I'm going in, and I probably wouldn't say anyway, but that'll be the adventure. We get 3 games on Saturday, so that'll help me get going, but I've got a few things I'm working on, and it's kind of a weird lull here, I feel like, where these last couple weeks there's really less at stake than when you really look at it, some of these games. They're less pivotal in some cases than it feels like it should be.
I don't know if you're comfortable saying this or not. I will say this. I just feel like the quality of play in general has been really lacking. Like watchability has been lacking. There's basically like 3 to 5 teams where if they're playing, like the Detroit Lions, the Chiefs, the Bills, there's a few of these teams where you're like, okay, those are very watchable, high quality teams. But there's a lot of teams where you're just like, God, this is boring.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think there's more teams with 3 or fewer wins at this time than normal as well. There's less of a kind of a middle class. I noticed that yesterday. I was kind of looking at how many teams over the years would have had 5, 6 wins. There's fewer sort of 5, 6 win teams than normal right now. Like those aren't good teams, but they can be somewhat competent, you know? I feel like
Right.
the floor. I agree. I feel like the floor is lower. I don't know that I can prove that, but I think you make a good point.
Well, you mentioned like I mean some of the lower win teams. The Bengals are just an odd team. They're under 500 with like having a MVP caliber season from Joe Burrow, and I'm very
Well,
curious about that game against Denver tomorrow.
0 wins. They have 0 wins this year against teams that currently have a winning record. Baltimore has 7. When you
Wow.
just talk about these MVP races,
Yes.
Baltimore has 7 with a defense and special teams that have been pretty good lately, but over the course of the year, bad.
I cannot even imagine, Mike, the conversations in Cincinnati among Bengals fans when you've got one of the clearly everyone says one of the 5 best quarterbacks in football. No one's going to argue about Joe Burrow being one of the best. And you've got one of the best receivers in football.
Yeah.
And you're scoring points and you're not good enough. Like, where do you go? Like, I guess coach, but like in Seattle, it's always, well, the quarterback, trade the quarterback, get rid of the receiver that gets into fights and, whatever.
Yeah, they may need to just figure out a different approach to defense. Obviously, the drafting is part of that too, and talent acquisition. But
Even Trey
the
Hendrickson's
defense,
having like an all pro, like he's having a defensive player of the year kind of year. Like, right?
yeah, you're right. That's a good project for me. I need to look at. I was going to do something. I've kind of been looking at Cincy anyway, but this is a good one. I'm just going to put it in
I
my
would
notes
say
here.
like when has there been a team that finishes under 500 or out of the playoffs that has an MVP vote getting quarterback, an all pro receiver, and a defensive player of the year vote getting defensive player? It's a really weird setup over there.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a good one.
Well,
There's
I'll
something
be
wrong.
sure
There's
to read
something
it.
wrong there.
There's something
Yeah.
weird for sure.
Like,
All
I was
right,
kind
Mike.
of thinking about writing it this last week if they lost to Cleveland. I just I need to do a little bit more research because they ended up winning, but they are interesting to me. A lot of
Well,
people just
Seahawks
write off
fans are-
same old Bengals, but whatever.
Seahawks fans are cheering for the Broncos of all things. It's a very odd bedfellows. They need them
That's
for the
right.
strength of victory. So we'll
Hey,
see that game tomorrow. And Mike, appreciate you coming on as always this week, and we will catch up with you next week.
Love it. Thanks, Brian.
All right, that was Mike Sando of The Athletic, the best in the business. And we're so lucky to have him each and every week. Thanks, folks. If you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. I would greatly appreciate it. Head on over to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, get access to the Slack channel, get access to the audio versions of all of these shows. If the audio is not quite equalized and you like it better when it's perfectly equalized, that's what you get over at Patreon. I do that immediately following each one of these. So sign up, get access, and support the show. All right, folks, I'm going to go take a nap. I'm ready for a nap. Appreciate all you. Going to try to fight off whatever cold I've caught on the trip. So I have a voice over the next few weeks as we continue each and every day giving you new, fresh Seahawks content. Appreciate all of you. Make sure you check out the morning after column I wrote over there on hawkblogger.com. All right, until the next time, folks, take care. Appreciate all you.